Good evening, you fantastic and glorious degenerates of this floating rock that we call Earth. Welcome to the Cajun Libertarian Live. I am your host, the Cajun Libertarian, and tonight we will be talking again with the man, Matt Kibbe. Love him. You all love him. So, coming up next on the Cajun Libertarian Live, tune in. Yes. Welcome back to the Cajun Libertarian Live. And without further ado, let's bring on the man that you all know and love, Mr. Matt Kibbe. Matt, how are you, man?
Hey, it's good to be back.
Oh, man, thank you so much for joining us. Cannot thank you enough for coming back on the show. How was D.C., that absolutely despotic and disgusting hellhole of a Capitol Hill?
It doesn't seem to end here. I live on Capitol. By the way, my cat has joined me again. This is a different cat than before.
I love it.
This is Rourke. All of my cats are Randians, and that's a whole different episode we can do. But I live 2 blocks from the Supreme Court, and it has been a lot of chaos, and they have a lot of streets around me blocked off. So I don't know. I think I talked about this last time. I've been trying to convince my wife, Terry, to let me leave DC, but she loves her house and she loves her friends and her community. And I think I'm going to lose that fight.
Well, I can't really blame you for either, right? For losing the fight or even having the fight. I personally would love to have you out of DC.
Free me. Free me.
Yeah, free the people and free Matt Kibbe for sure. That cannot be a very let's say positive atmosphere over there. But we all thank you and love you for keeping up the fight in that absolutely disgusting hellhole of corruption and swampiness. Not to steal anything from Donald Trump, because I don't, but it is what it is. I mean, that place is incredible. So yeah, thank you for living in that nonsense. And so like we were talking about before the show, you got your Rush shirt on, man. I love it. I'm a huge Rush fan. Neil Peart's the greatest drummer that's ever been alive, in my personal opinion. I grew up on Rush, my parents' favorite band, my personal favorite band of all time. Tell us about your experience with Rush.
So I've been a Rush fan since I was 13 years old. And I heard it like I'm old enough that you had to discover music in a very difficult way. You couldn't go on Spotify and you couldn't like Google it. You had to hear it.
Right.
And one day in high school, I heard some kids playing this album, and it was like nothing else I'd ever heard. It was All the World's a Stage, which was their first live album.
Yes,
and
indeed.
I went to the store because I had to have that album. I'm like, I've never heard anything like that. That's amazing. And I couldn't find it because back then the stores didn't have all those choices. And I found 2112 and I took it home album. And, back in the day when we bought vinyl records, you would read the liner notes. And 2112 is dedicated to the genius of Ayn Rand. And
Nice.
I'm 13. I'm like, who's that dude? And I have no idea. But I went on to discover her book Anthem at a garage sale. And I followed the breadcrumbs all the way through her recommendations to read Austrian economics. And that Rush album is the reason I'm here today. And Neil Peart, who was the lyricist for Rush, for most of his career, actually all of his career, he had identified as a libertarian. As he got older, he called himself a bleeding heart libertarian. I think in large part frustrated with the inability of libertarians to connect with people's emotions. And maybe we'll talk about that in the context of some other things tonight. But amazing band. Like they were virtuoso musicians. They were a thinking band. They didn't sing about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. They sang about ideas. And to me, that's what was so attractive about Neil Peart's lyrics. Like, they made you think. And we were talking earlier about Farewell to Kings. And if anyone wants an introduction to Rush, I recommend that album and that song. It is a completely fitting story for where we are today, with the arrogance of political elites and how they don't give a damn about people.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's well said. The complexity of the conceptualism that, and most people don't know this about Neil Peart and his lyrics, right? Most people don't understand that the drummer of Rush was who made most of the lyrics, and were just absolutely conceptually fascinating and above, like you said, what most people of their time were doing. What most people were doing were singing about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And what Neil Peart was writing his lyrics and Rush was singing about were conceptually groundbreaking philosophical thing. Like, the thing that comes to mind, one of the songs that stood out to me with them, when I realized that this is what they were doing, they were actually trying to engage our intellectualism, is The Trees, right? If you remember The Trees,
Yeah,
that song, amazing song. That's like, okay, these people are doing something different.
Yeah.
And they're actually trying to engage your intellectualism and trying to engage that part of your brain that's connected to not just musicality, but the philosophical side of it. Not just amazing.
When you think back, The Trees is ultimately a critique about what we now call equity, not even social justice, but equity. And it's a metaphor where the trees are fighting about getting sunlight, so they end up chopping each other down. And it, what's interesting about Neil Peart, and I didn't know this until recently, when I was writing my last book, Don't Hurt People and Don't Take Their Stuff. But Rush was perhaps one of the very first musical acts to be a victim of cancel culture. And this is way before Twitter and the internet. But when Neil Peart thanked Ayn Rand in the liner notes of that album, there was sort of the Rolling Stone of the time. It was called New Musical Express, wrote a hit piece comparing libertarians in Rush to the Nazis at Auschwitz. And it was a particularly offensive hit because, and most people don't know this either, but Geddy Lee, the lead singer from Rush, his parents actually met as teenagers at Auschwitz.
Yep.
So you imagine what a deep cut that left on the band and Neil Peart. And I think he struggled for the rest of his career to understand why exactly someone would do something so hateful when he was just trying to, he's trying to figure out how the world works. He was trying to explain how he viewed the world in what amounts to a kind of a science fiction take on Anthem, which is what 2112 is. And so he dealt with that, I think, in his music and his lyrics and the way he thought about the world for the rest of his life. But obviously they weren't canceled. They become a massively popular band, but the same talking points. And this is like 1976. Anyone that believes in freedom is sort of dubbed a Nazi or a fascist, and we're playing the same game today, right?
Yeah, repetitive. I mean, it's no different. It's the exact same game. It's anything that we deem obstructive to our ability to control the narrative, then you're a freaking Nazi, or you're, a fascist. And it's so underlining of the fact that our society doesn't even appreciate, number one, right? The most shallow and superficial idea is that we don't even appreciate language anymore. We don't appreciate the value that words and labels have. This is a huge problem for me because call me old fashioned, right? I'm 39, but I still put a huge paramount on what definitions actually mean. I
Yeah.
want to go back to, does this word, does this thing actually say and do what you're applying it to? And you're finding out that in the vast majority of cases, left and right, that's not the case. Anybody we don't like is either a communist or alt right.
Right.
And
Right.
we're not putting a value on etymology anymore, which is a huge concern for me, because if we really wanted to actually place intrinsic value and merit on the language of our society, then we would embrace how we define things. And this is an absolute lapse for me. It frustrates. It's one of the most frustrating things for me. Am I wrong here?
It's one of my biggest obsessions is encouraging people, particularly libertarians, because I'm in this tribe. Like I am a libertarian, and I want everybody to get turned on to these beautiful ideas and solutions I think that I've stumbled upon.
Right.
But we're as guilty as anybody to not listening to other people, and not what they say and the words they use, but what they're trying to mean when they say those things. And that,
Right.
there's everything now is so tribal, and maybe we talked about this last time, but language, once you say, I'm a conservative or I'm a liberal or I'm a progressive, less so with I'm a libertarian, because I think so few people even know what that is.
Right.
But it stops people from hearing what other people are trying to say. And I think, this plays out every week in social media, and this week it's playing out on
Big time.
gun control and the latest school shooting, where I don't think anyone can hear each other. They just sort of jump back into their team.
I love that. What you just said right there is amazing. And I don't want to just skip that over. We are not hearing each other. Can you explain? Because I know I think I know what you're trying to say, but my God, is that so vastly important?
Yeah, like a story I tell a lot is I've been part of a progressive working group, and they were, and by the way, a second cat has joined us, so this
I
maybe we'll
love it.
just talk about cats tonight. Hey, buddy.
I love it. We have a cat of our own.
Um, this guy, maybe he'll come over here. His name's Reardon. All my cats are named after Rand characters, so that's a thing. But
Hilarious.
but I joined this progressive group, and I was sort of their token libertarian, and they were kind enough to include me. But I realized quite quickly, when it was off the record and behind the scenes, all that stuff, and I was truly trying to understand where people that philosophically were in a very different place than I was, where they were coming from. But I noticed that even though they were speaking perfect English, like all the words were English, the sentences were well structured, I really had no idea what they were talking about.
Right.
And like, if you go on, maybe not MSNBC because everybody's shouting at each other, but if you actually go try to listen to a modern progressive and the kind of language they use and the meaning that's embedded in that language, it's very difficult to understand what they're saying. And that's one thing. But if you think about who we are and all the tribal language that libertarians use, like non-aggression principle, you and I know what that means, but
Correct.
no normal people have any idea what we're trying to say when we
Right.
say that. So I think
Right.
like listening, asking questions, and not making it sort of a partisan slugfest, because once people get into their fight mode, there's no chance at connecting. There's no chance at persuasion. This is why everything we do at Free the People is really designed to be sort of above the political fray. I don't even I
Amen.
do it, but I sometimes I don't even like using the word libertarian, because it is an ism, like all the other isms that I spend so much
Correct.
time criticizing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I wholeheartedly agree, right? Like a lot of people that are tuned in or starting to tune in and trying to figure out what libertarian is, uh, libertarianism is we have this select language that we use. But I will say this, that we have definitive, discussions about what it is that we actually stand on and believe in. And that there's, when we boil it down, there's not really a whole bunch of gray area. But to your prior point, when you were saying that you were talking with progressives, here's my issue. They have, and their language is polluted with ambiguity for a specific reason. Okay, ours isn't. It may be ambiguous on the face, on its face, on the surface, but we can explain what it means. Their language is ambiguous for a reason, because they do not want us to pin down exactly what a definition of a thing is. No matter what that thing is, it real, I'm been fighting over it, right? Like, okay, well, you weren't being ambiguous here. Let's nail down this definition of what it is you exactly mean.
Yeah.
And I still can't get a damn straight answer.
Yeah.
Our language might be foreign to a lot of people, but we can give you the exact X, Y, and Z of what it is we're talking about. But when it comes to progressive and their language, it's ambiguous for a reason. And I believe personally, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that language is that polluted with ambiguity for the sole purpose of being able to shift the goalposts at any time that they wish. Because if you can change and manipulate the vocabulary, then you can always control the narrative. Am I
Yeah.
wrong?
No, I think you're right. And I think our communication sins are that we're generally motivated by um, a keen sense of morality, of right and wrong,
Yeah.
a very logical approach to things. I'm an economist by
Right.
nature, and I think
Amen.
about things in terms of institutions and economic incentives and what happens when you ignore those things. And also just like for all the talk about data and people can abuse data, we try to actually look at the
Yes.
numbers and see what's going on. And I think our weakness is that most people, progressive, conservative, libertarian, whatever, don't really consume the world that way. So that's our weakness. Progressive leaders, and I always draw a distinction between people that might identify as progressive or sort of curious about progressivism or are saying those things that they've heard progressives say versus the leaders. And I think you're spot on when it comes to the leadership, that the language is specifically designed to confuse and obfuscate and keep people wondering what exactly is right and wrong, those kinds of things. But I think people that use that have sort of glommed onto that language because that's what they heard,
Correct.
and they're trying to explain something and they're struggling to figure stuff out. Um, that's different. And when I say trying to understand where other people are coming from, I'm talking about people, not
Yeah.
apparatchiks, not the experts, not the
Right.
people in power that are trying to impose their views on other people. I'm just talking about, like, the 22-year-old kid that's tuning into Joe Rogan just because he doesn't disrespect their process of trying to figure stuff out.
No, I could not agree more. Right. So, like, when as you just highlighted, when I talk about these things specifically, I mean specifically these politicians and these people that are actually in MSM, right? Sorry, I shouldn't have even used MSM. Mainstream media is not a thing anymore. Mainstream media is what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Mainstream media is the collective on the internet expressing ideas. What I mean, and I apologize for misrepresentation, is corporate media.
Right.
And they still do have somewhat of a stronghold, but that's dying fast. It's dying real fast. And those are the ones that tend to typically use this type of language that we're discussing. And I do wholeheartedly believe that its sole purpose and intent is divide and conquer.
Yep, 100%. And I think the more hostile they get, the corporate media, the machine, the collusion of big media and big government, which I know we talked about last time.
Mhm.
They're so desperate to shut us down because they're losing that conversation. And
Correct.
I think people are calling bullshit on it. And that's why, as you know, we'll spend most of tonight talking about how desperately bad things are right now. But I'm a long-term
Right.
optimist about these things. I think people are onto their game, and they're going to work it out. And um, for those of us that want to connect with people about liberty, that like view that as an opportunity, but be there for them and meet them where they're coming from, not from some sort of ivory tower where, you know, if they're not 100%, we're not going to give them the time of day, because we do have that sort of tendency, right? Like, oh, he's not a real
Yeah.
libertarian.
Oh yeah. That gatekeeping is kind of a cancer. I would argue that is within the libertarianism or liberty movement, probably the number one cancer. But you're absolutely right there. Gatekeeping is horrible, but I do think that, like you said, we have the voice now. We have the opportunity to reach out and actually connect people with our ideas and long term optimism, right? Like you just said, right after our last conversation, I had Spike Cohen on, and I was talking to him. I was like, dude, Matt just fussed at me for not being enough of an optimist, you know, and I want to correct that. I want to be on that, right? I'm inherently kind of a chaotist, right? Just a person that sees what's coming. And I'm like, oh, well, the chaos is coming right now. This is what we need to do. There's no hope, but here's the hope in how we can salvage ourselves. There's
Yeah.
just no hope within the government, right? But then after having that conversation with you and then talking with Spike, and I'm realizing I'm like, I got to change my mindset and I've got to express the things that I actually feel and see every day. I get the opportunity to meet new people and talk about politics every single day. And what I see and feel is actually optimistic. And so I think we should embrace that approach. We need to take every single opportunity that we can to show them, hey, look, X, Y, and Z, yeah, it's real effing bad. But here's A, B, C, D, E, F, G as to why this can work in our favor.
Yep. I I really believe, particularly in Americans, like there's something about Americans, but I think people generally, like, we have a tremendous capacity to figure stuff out, to work around obstacles, and to find a better path. And that that is essentially the story of America's process of becoming
Right.
what it is. And I'm, you know, I'm not an American exceptionalist the way conservatives talk about, but I think there's something cool about our rules and our
Yeah.
ethos, and I really believe in that, and I think that's why we find ourselves on the receiving end of so much global scorn sometimes, because
Yeah.
the planners and the elitists and the people that want to control our lives really don't like our independence, and that's what they're trying to stamp out, and that's precisely what we're trying to reignite.
Oh, they hate it. They hate it. They absolutely hate our fire for independence and individual liberty. I think you're so spot on right there. And something I've been following so closely for, oh man, I don't know, I guess closing on a year now is the World Economic Forum, and they're in Davos right now doing their thing. This is exactly what you're referencing right here,
Yeah.
is that these extremist globalist leaders, they absolutely disdain our taste and preference for individual freedom with the basic. And look, y'all, just just letting you know, these aren't fancy words, these aren't fancy things. These people at the World Economic Forum, these progressives, these globalist elitist progressives, they hate one idea, and that idea is this right here: just leave me alone and let me do my thing.
Yeah.
That's literally what they hate.
Yeah. They're almost a caricature. And I remember way back, people would go to Davos and it was considered sort of left of center elitist place where sort of the beautiful people would gather and sort of look down at the rest of us working rubes. But it was actually Glenn Beck who first said to me, and I thought he was a little bit nutty at the time. And he's like, "These guys, these guys are dangerous. These guys are wanting to take over the world." And
Yep.
I got to say, he was 100% right. He just wrote a book on this, but he's been talking about it for years. They are the new Marxists in a sense that they're not really socialists the way that you would think of Marxists, dialectic of the march of history.
Right,
They're
right,
they're
right.
they're just technocratic planners in the way that the original progressives were. They were eugenicists and they were elitists, and they really thought that they could redesign the world through science from the top down. And when you watch any session from the World Economic Forum, they very very much view people like farm animals, and
Cattle.
they want to inject us with these tracking systems and they want to manipulate us. And it's like
Quite
this is
literally.
it's almost like a James Bond movie
Really is.
caricature of an evil guy, like the guy Dr. Evil Guy.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
forgetting what's his name. I can't remember his name right now.
yeah. Dr. Evil is from Austin Powers, but same concept applies for sure.
Yeah.
There's a couple of them. You could look through any real comic book supervillain, and you'll see the same thread, right? Go to Superman. Go look at Superman comic books from days old. You'll find that Lex Luthor had the same idea. He
Yeah.
wanted to take the world over via science because they have this idea that the realm that they live in, which is outside of the realm of reality, that's what people are missing. Right? And I think people are waking up to it, but a lot of people are missing is that they're living in this bubble. And on his face, on paper, hypothetically, it seems like, hey, look, that might work, but in reality, it cannot work
No,
because you can't.
it's a religious thing, um, in the worst possible sense, because they want to make um, scientific perfection the new religious faith. And you hear that from
Correct.
progressives when they say the science is settled, which is the most unscientific thing you can actually say, be-
Absolutely
be-
100%.
because science is this endlessly curious process of trying to figure things out that you don't understand. And the origins of socialism weren't Marx at all. It was a guy named Henri de Saint-Simon, a French aristocrat, of course, who actually wanted to replace traditional religion, Christianity, with temples to Newton, as in Sir Isaac Newton. And it was two parts crazy and one part predictive, because that's kind of where we are today. When we put Tony Fauci on a prayer candle, as if
Hmm.
as if he is our Lord and Savior. And it's creepy and dangerous and hubris and everything you can imagine.
Oh man, you could not have said that better. The only thing I'll add to that is, personally, I okay. Let me say it like this: I'm against the death penalty. 100% against state death penalty. If I were to make an exception, a public hanging would be in order for certain people. Okay, I think And I'm not saying that that's Fauci. I'm saying that has there anybody been worse in public uh, uh, epidemiology or public health
You just,
in
yeah, you just don't want to give
mitigate?
anyone, you don't want to give anyone that much power, because the consequences of their mistakes, and we've been talking about this for 2 years, but the audacity and the arrogance of what we did to people over the past 2 years
My God.
has real life consequences. Like, people died, people suffered, poverty, which we had been successfully beating back over the last generation, is back again. Um,
Yeah.
the depression, like we could just list all night long the crimes they committed against humanity, particularly people that couldn't afford, to fight back. I mean, the laptop class did fine. They stayed home.
Yep.
People delivered food to their doors, but people
Yep.
that were struggling, kids who were struggling in school, people that were struggling to feed their families, people struggling with mental health issues, people with other diseases that the government didn't apparently care about. Like,
Yep.
all of these things are very tangible things that we could measure, and those are crimes against humanity. Those aren't mistakes
100%.
because um, there were voices that were trampled out that were pointing out these very obvious trade-offs, these costs to what they were doing. So, yeah, like I'm against the death penalty too, but I'm not against calling people out who committed these crimes, and we should.
100%. I and I have been on this hill. It's the reason that I am here right now because my God, what happened over the last 2+ years, I'm fed up and sick. And at this point right now, I'm really, really upset at how we've just discarded the crimes against humanity, which is that's exactly what I've been calling it for a year now, or better than a year. And we're just going to let these people off the hook because, oh, well, the science is different now. So no more masks, no more locking people up, no more forced vaccination. No, I'm not done with this. Not by a long shot. These people need to go to jail. And I've got to be careful with what I say here. Excuse me. But I'm not done with this. There, no chance, no freaking chance should we let this go. What's happened over the last 2+ years is not only horrifically criminal, but by design. In my own personal opinion, you don't have to agree with me on that. Mistakes can be made. I get that. People, will make scientific mistakes. I get that, but excuse me if I'm not going to buy that from people that knew from the jump who were involved in the freaking scientific research in this matter. And
Yeah,
then they want to lock everyone down and crush our economy and then just open it back up like, yeah, this is just something we can hit a button. It's just a video game. Well,
yeah.
we saved our progress. We're going to pause it for a bit. Now let's restart. No, that's not how it works. You've crushed people's lives. A lot of people are dead now because of you. I'm not letting this go. These people need to be held to account.
Right. So, like, I just remembered the guy's name. I called him Dr. Evil. His name is Klaus Schwab, and and he actually
I
he
didn't
actually
know that's who
looks
you're looking for.
he looks like Dr. Evil, and he acts like Dr. Evil, except that he may be more evil than Dr. Evil.
Much more.
And he will be the first one to say, but not the only one to say, that COVID and the lockdowns have created an opportunity to do things we've never been able to do before. So they've built this infrastructure, and it goes to this evil philosophy of viewing people as pieces in a puzzle, or pieces on a chessboard, or just cogs in a machine to manipulate,
Yep.
like farm animals. And this gets at this project, this scientific thing, whatever it is they want to call it, and they're wanting now to set up the exact infrastructure that China has, the social credit system, that
Correct.
where they're going to grade us based on our behavior. You know, are we complying with the medical protocols they want? Are we complying with their climate change protocols? What aren't we doing as good citizens? And to me, that's the thing we're fighting now. We're not really fighting the socialists
Amen.
anymore. We defeated
No,
the socialists. Now we're fighting these technocratic authoritarians that just don't give a
absolutely.
damn about people.
No, they could care less. All they care about is their power and this philosophy that they deem worthy of globalist agenda. I want to go to this comment real quick, Matt. It's Aaron Sigler. Aaron Sigler is a neurosurgeon that follows me. We had a massive shift from treatable cancers to late stage incurable cancers because people avoided going to the hospital during the peak of the pandemic. That is straight from a neurosurgeon. Aaron, thank you for that comment. And you couldn't be more right. I mean, what we did over the last 2+ years is nothing short of mass criminality. What we've done, people don't think about, or I say people. I'm sorry, I'm not talking to y'all. I'm saying there's a lot of people that don't think about the repercussions of what really happened because they don't really understand what has gone on the last 2+ years. We only look at surface level um, content, right? And so when you have a comment like that from a neurosurgeon, that really speaks volumes about how much we've neglected and intentionally neglected the health and reality of this situation of the 2+ years. And it's incredibly criminal. And I'm sorry, I will not give this up. I will die on this hill. They can axe me from the internet. They already have, and I'm back. That's fine. I don't care. I'm not going to let this go. What these people did, and I wholeheartedly, Matt, you can disagree with me here. I wholeheartedly believe that the vast majority of these quote unquote experts, they did it intentionally to create a dependency on the system to say that we are the only experts. We are the only ones that know this information. You are a pleb. You are a freaking peasant, and you have no right to critically think on your own. You must follow us on all costs.
Yeah. This your neurosurgeon friend is 100% right, and you can now produce the data to prove that the
Correct.
number one and number two causes of death in the world, which is cardiovascular disease, is number one, cancer is number two. Um, those two categories we completely neglected during lockdowns, and it wasn't just that we scared cancer patients away
Mm,
from getting detection, from getting treatment. We also had politicians, governors in particular, deciding that hospitals would prioritize COVID and basically making it illegal for other people to get treatment for other stuff, as if the governor of New York, the now infamous Andrew
mm.
Cuomo, had any idea what it meant to sort of prioritize the challenges of everybody's health. And I'll tell you a specific story, and this goes back to our messaging thing, because I've written a paper on this. There is very clear data that demonstrates that we killed a lot of people by shifting the entire political focus on COVID. The data is there, the numbers are there, the body count is there, but
Right.
data is not that persuasive. So one of the films that we made during lockdowns is a story about a family in Brooklyn, New York. The documentary is called All We Have. You can watch it at freethepeople.org. And it is a
Amen.
story about a family restaurant struggling to stay open when Cuomo locked down restaurants. But it's also a story about a family who lost their son because when he started having seizures, and um, because COVID was mandated a priority at hospitals, he wasn't able to get access to the tests that he needed, and he ended up dying. And to
Wow.
me, that story is more powerful because you meet his dad, you know his name, and you see that that didn't have to be the case. And we can add it up, and we can add all of these numbers together and show that stupid policies killed a lot of people. But I want people to know at a very emotional level, not a logical level, not an economic level, but an emotional level, that
Yeah.
these mistakes had real consequences for real families.
Yeah, and I think that's verifiable on paper. I don't think I know. We know for a fact that these consequences are verifiable on paper, and we also know without a shadow of a doubt that every measure that was taken um, did not help. They only hurt. But yet we still have people out here thinking that what we did helped mitigate the spread in death and hospitalization of said disease. And we know for a fact that it did not. And every single measure that was taken only hurt. And the story that you just laid out gives us another prime example of exactly how we've been so wrong, and not just wrong. And that's what pisses me off. It's not about being freaking wrong. It's about the fact that this was criminal. We destroyed lives. And it just I'm sorry. It just
So let's find the upside here, because we're driving each other into a dark hole here. Um,
right.
the alternative, and so everything we're talking about is critiquing the arrogance of someone with political power thinking they know better than people
Okay.
in their lives, in their communities, in their families.
Right.
People that know things that no politician could ever know. And the alternative to a one size fits all central planned response to one of many challenges. COVID was a challenge. It was a very deadly disease, but it was one of a million things that people were dealing with. Always true.
Right.
People are always dealing with all this stuff. And the alternative to politicians deciding what the priorities are and how to deal with them, because they couldn't possibly know, is letting people figure that stuff out in a very local, personal, bottom up kind of way. And that is the
Right.
basis of the libertarian philosophy, is that we actually believe that people are capable of figuring stuff out, and that
Correct.
other people know things that we don't know, and through the process of voluntary cooperation, we could do beautiful things together. And I think
Amen.
part of the thing we're pretty good at is raging against the machine. The part that we're not so good at sometimes is talking about this beautiful process of cooperation that does amazing things. And I think we need to always pivot from just the critique of what Dr. Evil wants to do to explaining why we got a better solution, and it's based on human respect, and it's based on cooperation, and it's based on the ability of people to determine their own lives.
Right.
And that to me is like, that's sort of the bleeding heart libertarianism version of libertarianism, but that's a piece of the puzzle.
Right. So let me ask you this, and maybe this is a little bit of a pushback here, but how do we bridge the gap between Dr. Evil, aka Klaus Schwab. And you know, Klaus Schwab is just a representation of a globalist agenda that is absolutely polluted our governmental infrastructure, basically almost every governmental infrastructure on the planet. How do we bridge the gap between these people are evil in what they're doing, and we need to make individual liberty paramount, right? Because that's a huge, that's a huge space between those two things,
Right.
right? And there's a lot of people that are going to have a lot of questions in between that space. So how do we bridge that gap?
Well, they're opposites, right? And I've always described it as, you know, our story should be half Rage Against the Machine, and we shouldn't pull our punches when we're explaining how arrogant and deadly the philosophy of the Klaus Schwabs of the
Right,
world is, but also that, you know, we're not saying, um, you know, screw people, let's just see what happens. We're saying that there is a
exactly.
proven process by which free people make things better. And to my thinking, it's the central planners, it's the Dr. Evils of the world are the ones that are on the spot to explain how it is they could possibly know more than millions and millions of people with all of their personal expertise on how to solve problems. To me, that's the onus we put on them. So it's a these are polar opposite things. One is beautiful, one is evil and arrogant, and we should call both those things out. But we spend all of our time railing against Klaus Schwab, and we forget to explain to people who are worried about real life problems, including
Right.
viruses and everything else they deal with in their lives. And you know, we don't always get around to explaining how it is that freedom best manages those types of problems and comes up with solutions and paths forward and ways that people can live their lives.
Yeah, I totally agree. This is something that, and I get most people don't have the opportunities that I do. I have a very advantageous uh, day job. I get to meet new people every day, and I get to talk with them about their daily lives and about how, you know, the current economic and political system is affecting them on an everyday basis. That's something that a lot of people don't get to do, and I do, right? I don't bring up Klaus Schwab or the World Economic Forum,
Right.
right? This is something that we need to, you know, dissect and dive off into, and people will understand it eventually. I don't think that our society is stupid like a lot of people do. I think that the vast majority of the people that live in this country are very well equipped to handle knowledge when it comes in information, when it comes to things like the World Economic Forum and what Klaus Schwab and what the globalist agenda is. But when I'm talking to somebody in their homes, and you know, I reference this specifically because this is a demographic that I talk to on a daily basis. When I talk to the single black mother who's got 3 kids and she's trying to pay rent and she's trying to get her kids to school, she's not concerned about that. And she doesn't care about your politics. She wants to know, how the hell am I supposed to live this life and raise my kids the best I can with no effing father and gas prices the way they are, with an obvious school corruption? These
Yeah.
are things that average everyday people, that's what they're concerned about. So that's why I asked, how do we bridge the gap, right? Because there has to be a gap bridge of information between, we have this absolutely corrupt globalist system that's affecting us all, and that is literally the underlying issue of all of our problems, to you're paying X at the gas pump and you can't afford to put your kid in school
Yeah.
because you're a single mother that's going through things. I mean, it's really, really intense.
You gotta meet that mom where she lives and
Meet her where she at.
where the troubles that she is dealing with, and maybe it's gas prices, maybe it's probably primarily the crappy education system that she can't even rely on to keep her kids safe, let alone teach
Right.
them. Um, I think it's all those things, and I think the stories we tell, for the people that we're talking to, have to meet them where they are, because nobody gives a shit about Davos,
No.
and that's honestly, that's not the problem. Davos is not the problem. Klaus Schwab is not the problem. The arrogance of centralization
Yeah.
and and how it's corrupted our schools, how it's corrupted the family, how it's corrupted everything in the lives of real people. I think that's where we can make a connection, hopefully. And by the way, it's an emotional connection. They understand, like,
It is
the price of gas is an economics question, but it's also like, how am I going to
emotional.
get to work?
Yep.
And for the laptop class, they don't care. Doesn't affect them. Might affect their Uber Eats bill, but they don't care. So I think we need to sort of, the bridge, I think, is potentially between economics and the pain that people are feeling when they deal with the economic consequences of these bad policies.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautifully said because that's exactly correct in my personal opinion. Absolutely. We need to bridge the informational gap between uh, uh, how can I understand economics to make it work for me to these are the things that are economically affecting your life, right? And I think that's where a lot of people are misconstrued and they don't completely understand. They think they're hopeless. They're hopeless, and we shouldn't be hopeless. They're thinking of this. This is absolutely a freaking 100% product of a deterioration and exploitation of our education system that you're made to think that these basic economic structures that affect your daily life you can't absorb and interpret. This is objectively false.
Yeah.
Yes, we can. It doesn't take 5 seconds of research and understanding to figure out where this stuff comes from. And it's, to me, I guess I'd just say it's brainwashing. I
So
mean, that's what it is.
let's pivot. We were gonna talk a little bit about the latest tragic school
Yeah, actually, I have
shooting.
it pulled up right now.
And I think this might be a nice jumping off point, because one of the one of the things that I was thinking about in the response to this, and it's not the first time I thought about it. You could look at, on the one hand, people that say that America is uniquely violent, they're absolutely wrong. It is
Yes.
not true. And
Nope.
the 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 so-called data around mass shootings is wildly exaggerated. But honestly, one
Yep.
mass shooting's one too many. And there has been a growing trend since the early 1990s of school shootings, and we all know these stories. And one of the questions I have about the school system, the government school system, we call it the public school system, but it's really a government system. And
Correct.
particularly over the last 2 years, um, I think a lot of parents discovered that what they thought was an education system is particularly for kids that are different.
Hmm.
It's kind of a torture chamber. It's kind of a prison system. It's a regimented, you will fall in line and do X, Y, and Z, and you're going to do it over an 8-hour school day, and then we're going to let you go home. And I think we're learning the hard way that we're not treating kids like individuals, and particularly for troubled kids, you're going to end up with some horrific outcomes if you're not careful.
Yep. Completely agree. 100%. And here's the reason I say that is a lot I can go into right there. I'm going to keep it simple real quick. We are not cultivating the curriculum to the child. We have a system that has integrated uh, just mass psychosis formation. I mean, how else do you say it, right? That's it. We have a system that makes the kid, the child, integrate to the system, which we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that the education system doesn't work that way. We
Yeah.
understand fully. Even Newton said it. You can make a frog climb a tree, and then you're going to judge him as a squirrel. Quote, paraphrasing. You can't judge intelligence by one standard testing system. You can't, because each child is going to learn different. So when you subject every freaking child to the same system of educational learning, then of course you're going to have bad outcomes, because each of us as human beings have different levels of learning. We have different ways of interpretation of how we absorb information, and then we dissect it internally. This is a God-proven fact. And the way we're doing our education system right now, we're subjecting each kid to one standard of learning, that should be put in quotes. One standard of testing is the real thing. And then we're expecting that these kids aren't going to be frustrated when it doesn't turn out their way, when we're expecting them to do something that they should never be expected to do. What the hell are we talking about?
The other things that I noticed about there's a guy, let me find his name. There's a guy that I talked to, Dr. Warren Farrell, and his most recent book is called The Boy Crisis. And I did a bunch of interviews with him 2 or 3 years ago, and there was another school shooting, and he had observed a pattern amongst school shooters that was pretty predictive, not 100%, but one of the things that he noticed was these kids that go evil and end
Right.
up killing a bunch of people. They probably didn't have a dad, or they had an abusive dad, or they had a dysfunctional relationship with their dad. And
Almost always.
the latest one fits that category. Dad was not there. And
Yep.
his point, and he's got a whole philosophy. He started off as a second wave feminist, which is very different than modern feminism. And
Very.
he got turned off by the evolution of feminism because it started to become anti-man. And he, like myself, was all in on women being treated equally with respect
Same here.
in the workplace and everywhere else. And at some point it became kind of a man-hating thing. And his point is, we need strong, independent women, and we need strong, healthy, independent, disciplined men. And one of the things he pointed out was that the breakup of the family, and I think he even goes to this, but I'll go there, that that the way that we've incentivized families to not be moms and dads. Not to be a full family is, and by the
Nuclear.
way, I'm not against other forms of families either. I'm just talking about this as
Right.
as a as a sort of way that young boys learn how to be responsible men. I think that's
Right.
a factor as well, and I think that's a factor. That's it is cultural, but again, getting back to economics, has the welfare state incentivized um, uh, dads to walk away? And I think
Yep.
the
Yep.
answer is absolutely yes.
Absolutely, 100%. Let me read your tweet here, and then let you even go even further with it, because this is a magnificent tweet. Questions that won't be answered. I'll I'll add to the fact that we can answer them, but they won't be answered by the people that need them to be answered. So, questions that won't be answered. Did punitive drug laws prevent mom from getting help? Did welfare make it easier for dad to abandon his family? Have public schools become callous prisons for struggling kids? Did lockdowns make things exponentially worse for someone on the edge? All of those questions.
So
Fantastic.
as I was reading the specifics of this latest shooting, you learn that he I forget the kid's name. We probably
Uh,
shouldn't say his name anyway.
yeah,
Um,
I don't know.
uh, he 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 was living with his grandmother and ended up shooting his grandmother,
Hmm.
who apparently tried to stop him from doing what he did, because his mom was an addict,
Yeah,
and and um, libertarians are obviously very critical of the war on drugs, in large part because it punishes people for um, addiction, and it prevents
correct.
people with addiction from getting the help they need, because admitting that you're a drug addict is a prison sentence. It's not an opportunity to find treatment, to find help. And I
Yep.
think we've talked a lot about the experiment in Portugal, and I assume you've heard of the story of Portugal, where Portugal was the number one death toll from drug abuse in all of the European Union. And about 15, 20 years ago, I don't remember right now, they decided to decriminalize everything, not just weed, but everything.
Yep.
And the results were almost miraculous, because
Yep.
they are now the best place in the European Union when it comes to drug overdoses and deaths. And it's because it's a sort of an obvious solution. It's because people with problems were free to come out and say, "I need help," and they
Yep.
could find that help, and they could quite often get their lives back together. The drug war does the opposite. It throws people in prison. They become part of the prison industrial complex, and they never get out again. That was his mom. His dad was never there. I don't know why, um, but I do know that generally speaking, um, fatherlessness in this country is incentivized by the welfare state. There's other reasons, and I'm not here to judge or say that there's a one size fits all answer to this, but we should at least ask the
Exactly.
question: are we actually creating this dysfunction with government policies that are claiming to help people? um, Schools, we've already
Right.
talked about schools. It's the same thing. And the other thing about this um, this kid that became a monster and slaughtered all these children, he fell apart during lockdowns,
Yep.
and
And he admits it.
he didn't show up after schools opened again. He was lost.
Hmm.
And I think you could look at data and find this pattern. There's a lot of kids, teen suicide, depression, all sorts of damage that we've done to kids during lockdowns, because socialization and gathering is such a key part of how they learn to survive as human beings. So I think we should at least look at some of these corruptions that government policies have done, instead of just falling into the typical political talking points of, oh, we need to ban assault weapons. I obviously I don't think that would be a solution anyway. I think it's just something that the left wants to do, and I don't know how anyone could look at what's going on in Shanghai right now and say, oh, let's give all the weapons to government. But
My God.
but on a practical level, you're not going to stop evil people from hurting people, but you could look at some of these systemic problems that might be the difference between someone who's troubled and struggling and someone who turns into a monster. And that's all I was saying in that tweet.
No, and you're absolutely 100% spot on, because I think that, I know for a fact that we're searching in the wrong directions for correction. And that might be a good tweet right there. We're searching in the wrong direction for correction. And that's absolutely spot on. What we're doing is not only discouraging from good and advantageous help, it's actually detrimental. What we've been look, let me put my tinfoil hat on, and feel free to disagree with me on this one. I am very convinced that it's by design. I don't know how to explain it, Matt. I really don't. Because if we really wanted answers, and if we really wanted to stop these kinds of acts of violence and just immorality, then the answers that they keep spewing and vomiting out on the internet and on media, they would go away. Because we all know that those are not the obvious answers. They're not. We need these kids to have help. And the help that you're not gonna give these kids help by banning guns. You're not gonna give these kids help by banning certain regulations in school. The Republican Democrat, that is not the answer. It's so much further, so much deeper than that. And we need to really look at psychologically why we've arrived at this point in time where we have literally the most gun restrictions that we've ever had in the United States, and still have these kids murdering other kids. When this didn't happen 50 years ago, when guns were everywhere, this is a psychological issue. This is a cultural issue. This has nothing to do with a piece of metal, plastic, or anything other than that. It doesn't. This is a psychological and cultural issue, and we have to figure out, it's our responsibility. I'm not going to say it's we have to. I shouldn't have worded it that way. I mean, I believe we do. We have that responsibility.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
we
we
got to
do.
figure out what's really going on here.
Yeah, like this is one of those adult conversations we should have, and that's why I said these questions won't be answered,
Right.
because politics doesn't really encourage serious self-reflection, and you could see this just in the corporate media's narrative. A shooting happens in Texas, and it's the governor's fault because he's a Republican and he's against gun
Right.
control. A mass shooting happens in New York, and the narrative is quite different. The governor of New York
Correct.
is not held accountable for that because because they have very strict gun control laws in New York, and somehow that didn't change the
That's white
outcome
supremacy.
at all. But it's, political discourse is not conducive to serious self-reflection, particularly if the perpetrators, the ones that are creating these laws that are really about obedience and control. They're not about to come out and say, "Oh, I got it wrong." Um,
Right.
they're not going to admit that. They're going to say, "We need to double down. We need to do more and more." Um, but the rest of us could have that conversation. And I even hesitated tweeting that because um, every time something this awful happens, people just get so violently emotional about it.
Exactly.
You hesitate to engage in the conversation, um, but I did anyway because that's what we do.
Right. Yeah. I mean, look, we have to. I
Yeah.
mean, at the expense of, our own self-worth, and maybe self-worth is not the proper terminology there, but
I don't
it's
mind
just
the hate.
something. Right.
I don't mind the
Exactly.
hate, and I particularly don't take um, uh, mean comments from people on Twitter seriously. I don't think that matters. I think, and again, like this gets to like, who are we speaking to? Like, who are we speaking to tonight, and who are we trying to speak to as people that love liberty and human dignity? We're
Right.
trying to connect with people that have open hearts and open minds, and they're trying to figure out something as complex as, what do you do about a confused kid that murders children? Um,
Right.
and what was the tipping point where that confused kid became an evil monster? And there's absolutely no easy answers to that question. And
Right.
you can't even have the conversation unless people are willing to sort of admit with some humility, I don't really know what to do. Which is why we
Mhm.
should try to figure this out. But I know that what we've been doing didn't work, and so maybe we should have some self reflection on that. But obviously, when you have those conversations, you're going to have people taking shots at you, but that's okay, because we're not talking to those guys. We're
Right.
talking to other good-hearted people trying to figure stuff out.
Correct. Absolutely. I mean, and that's all we can do, right? There are only look. There's no chance of trying to change somebody's mind who's already made up. They, we can try, give it our best effort. If they hear us, then amen. But by and large, the demographic, the audience we're trying to reach are people that are really, actually, and honestly trying to say, look, what can we do? Because this is brutal. We need some answers here. Those are the people, those are the demographic that we're trying to reach when it comes to situations like this. What else can we do? I mean, we have to try to get to the people that are reachable.
Yeah, but by the way, and it's I'll fall into my very libertarian, skeptical of gun control.
Mhm.
These school shootings, almost by definition, happen in gun-free zones. And in a gun-free zone, only law enforcement, only the government is allowed to have guns. And we're now learning that in this most recent shooting, the police with the guns didn't go in to try to save the kids. So my own, like I've always been philosophically 100% pro Second Amendment, but my own, and I grew up in rural Pennsylvania, so there were guns around. I was never a gun guy, but my wife and I decided to get our handgun licenses here in the District of Columbia, which is very difficult.
Very.
5 or 6 years ago, there was a shooting in Paris at a concert at the Bataclan. There's a band called the Eagles of Death Metal, and just a brutal terrorist attack where they just mowed people down, and people were helpless. And at that point, I realized that as someone that philosophically believed in the Second Amendment, I was kind of free riding on those that took that responsibility more seriously, because even when the police are heroic, and there are absolutely heroic police officers who save lives,
For sure.
they're probably not going to be there when you need them. They can't.
Nope.
They can't be there, particularly when it comes to random acts of violence, like you saw in Texas, or at this terrorist attack in Paris. We have a personal responsibility to keep our communities safe, and that's why I armed up. And Terry and I went, and we had always shot guns, but we went and got extensive training and took that responsibility. I personally am the guy that would not rather do that, because I'm not a gun nut. I'm guessing you're a gun nut, but I don't know this about you.
No, I love my firearms. I have many of them. I love
Yep.
going to the range, all that. But no, at no point in time of my life will I want to discharge my firearm in self-defense.
Yeah.
Not once. I don't. No, I like my life. I don't want to have to even deal with having to kill someone and live with that on my conscience. I don't want to have to deal with going through the court process. I don't want any of that. None of it. Please, God, just freaking be a decent human being and don't hurt people and don't take their stuff. I went and grabbed your book, by the
Yeah.
way, and it just played out perfectly. Yeah, it's so frustrating. Yeah, I would be labeled as a gun nut, but that's
Yeah.
irrelevant because I don't want to have to use my guns at all.
But I think, for all of these reasons, if we think our kids are not safe in school, if we think that we're not safe, the best way to make our communities safe is to decentralize that responsibility.
Correct.
And I believe that this, with all my heart, that centralized protection systems, even when they work, don't work. And by work, I mean even when the people in charge of our defense have the best incentives and really are the best at what they do. And by the way, they're not always those people.
Right.
We as libertarians are perfectly comfortable criticizing law enforcement when they abuse their power. So, but to me, the answer, like the answer to everything, is personal responsibility, decentralized authority, and cooperation that allows people to work together to make the world a better place. And you can apply that to schools. You can apply that to personal safety. You can apply it to every aspect of life that real people care about. And our project to sort of bring this full circle is like how do we connect to that mom you were talking about earlier? Well,
Yeah.
we got to figure out what she's struggling with, and what we might offer as practical, useful solutions that could make her struggle easier.
Yep. That's beautifully said. I don't know how else to say it. Exactly. We want to reach the people in our community that are struggling, that don't care about your freaking political agenda. How can we reach them and communicate on a very easily understandable basis of, look, this is your concerns. I understand your concerns. These are the reasons why you are even having those concerns in the first place. And that is government. It's government interventionism. It's too many laws. It's overreach. It's oversight. You should be able to have full autonomy over your life, and you're being blocked on a federal level and a state level, regardless of the state. Red, blue, doesn't matter. You're being blocked. Your ability to live and succeed in this life is being blocked directly from government. So, yeah, no, I had to, sorry, I went over there and grabbed it because you were making that freaking point and it was so perfect. Someone grabbed your book. Don't hurt people. Don't take their stuff. New York Times bestseller, Matt Kibbe. So, thank you, my friend. You are absolutely fantastic. I love every single conversation we have.
Cool. This was awesome. Let's do it again.
Man, I can't wait. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm gonna hit you up. You're kind of out of my league, but you're hanging out with me, so I'm gonna hit you up. You are fantastic. You are enlightening, and you always deliver something that is expressionable and absolutely relatable to the people, and 100% fantastic. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, sir.
Talk to you soon, man.
Talk to you.
What can I say? Absolutely fantastic. Somebody says beer soon. What do you mean beer soon? On my clock, it's 10:05. It's time for me to go to bed. I am almost 40 and I have 3 kids. Yeah, I don't know about beer soon. No thanks. Hard pass. I'll put it up there again though. It's funny. Oh man. James, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Kibbe. Yes, absolutely. Great show, Cajun. No, great show from Matt Kibbe. I mean, I appreciate the compliment. I shouldn't have said it like that. My bad. Thank you so much. Yeah. Absolutely fantastic. I mean, insight, valuable information, things that are hard to come across, conversations that are difficult to have every day in your community. But we got to have them, y'all. We have to have them. Amazing. I'm going to throw it up there again. Don't hurt people. Don't take their stuff. New York Times bestseller, Matt Kibbe. Go buy it. It's very cheap. Or very inexpensive. I should say it like that. Thank you so much. I love each and every one of y'all. Thank you, Matt, for joining me again. I feel very special and honored to have him on yet again. And given his approval, we'll have him on again soon because an amazing, amazing conversation as always. Great insight. I love you very much. I will see you soon. Same Cajun time, same Cajun channel. And I am out.